Legend of Solomon's Mines. I first met Sir Henry Curtis and Captain John Good on a ship that was sailing along the coast of South Africa. I was returning home after some bad luck on an elephant hunt beyond Mbamangwanso. Everything went wrong that trip. Plus, I came down with a fever. I wasn't so young anymore, and I needed to take time off and rest. Well, I was sailing toward my home in Durban, farther to the north, and I got to talking with two men on the ship. And the first was Sir Henry, was a tall, well-built man of about 30 years. He had blonde hair and a thick blonde beard and deep-set grey eyes. He reminded me strongly of somebody else, but I couldn't quite remember who it was. I knew right away the second man was a naval officer. Captain Good was the same age as his friend, but short and stout. He had dark hair and was clean-shaven. Something about the way he moved around on the ship told me he'd been at sea a great deal. He also wore a monocle clenched in his right eye socket and had a beautiful set of false teeth. "You're Alan Quatermain, aren't you?" Sir Henry Curtis asked as the three of us sat down at dinner. I said that I was. Not much more was said at dinner, but afterwards Sir Henry invited me back to his cabin to talk. "You were in Mbamangwanso 2 years ago, weren't you?" Curtis asked me. "I was," I answered, surprised he would know so much about me. "Did you happen to meet a man named Neville there?" "Yes, I did. He left to go into the interior with a guide named Jim, I believe. He was going to go as far back as any man had ever gone, he said. Why are you interested?" "Mr. Neville," said Sir Henry. "Mr. Neville is my brother." He went on to explain that he and his younger brother George had been very close until a few years ago. Then they had quarreled bitterly. When their father died, Sir Henry kept the inheritance for himself. George became angry and went off to Africa. He took the name Neville and hoped to make his fortune in the wild. Now, Sir Henry regretted his own actions very much, and he wrote to George, but the letters never quite reached him somehow. "George is the only relation I have," Sir Henry said. As time went on, I became more and more anxious to know if he was dead or alive. I asked people. They mentioned that he had gone to the interior and that he had met you. I decided to come here myself from England and try to find him. Captain Good was kind enough to come with me. Well, sir, I would give anything to know that my brother is safe." "Well, I understand your concern," I told him. I have a son, Harry. He's in England studying to be a doctor. I don't know what I would do if he became lost." "You've been here a long time, haven't you, Quatermain?" Captain Good asked. "Many years." "You know why my brother was going into the interior?" Sir Henry asked me. "Yes, but I've never told anyone. He was starting out. He was starting out to find King Solomon's mines, is what he was." "King Solomon's mines? Where are they?" "Well, I don't know. I know where they're said to be. I once saw the peaks of mountains that border them, but there are 130 miles of desert in between. Only one man I ever know of has crossed there."
"Well, tell us what you've heard."
"Well, all right, I will, but only if you promise not to reveal anything that I tell you."
"Well, certainly.
So then I went on to tell them that years ago I'd heard about spectacular ruins that exist in those remote and wild mountains, the Suleiman Mountains. They was told were especially interesting.
"Well, why are they so interesting?"
"Well, you see, Suleiman is Arabic for Solomon," I said. "This could have been the place where King Solomon got all his fabulous wealth." I told them beyond the Suleiman Mountains lived a tribe of peoples related to the Zulus, but even taller. There lived among them great wizards who knew the secrets of bright stones that were dug out of a mine there. I had laughed at these tales at the time, but later, when diamonds were discovered in South Africa, I began to wonder.
"Well, son, King Solomon's mines could be anywhere," said Sir Henry. "How would you ever find them?"
Wait, I said. "I haven't gotten the strangest part of all. Some years ago, I told them I was hunting in the countryside. I'd become very ill with a fever and could hardly get out of bed. I met a Portuguese trader, a very polite gentleman. He was tall and thin, with dark eyes, curling mustache. His name was José Silvestre. We became friendly. When he left for the interior, he said,
Goodbye, my friend. If we meet again, I will be the richest man in the world.
I was too weak to laugh at his joke. I watched him head out toward the desert. I wondered then if he was mad. What did he think he could possibly find there? A week later, I was feeling better. One evening, as the red sun was sinking in the desert, I saw a man approaching. He must have been European because he wore a coat. He staggered and dropped to his hands and knees. It was Jose Silvestre. There wasn't much left of him. He was just a skeleton and some skin. His face was yellow with fever. His eyes stood nearly out of his head. His hair had gone white.
Water! Water!
He cried. His lips were cracked, his tongue black and swollen. I gave him some water with a little milk in it. He drank 2 quarts without stopping. Then the fever took over. He began to rave about the Suleiman Mountains and the diamonds and the desert. Well, I did what I could for him, but I knew he was sure to die. And he slept through the night. In the morning, the rays of the sun hit the tallest of the Suleiman Mountains.
It is,
Jose Silvestre said, pointing with his thin arm.
I'll never reach it. No one never will.
I wondered what he meant then. Are you there?
Are you there? Are you there? My eyes grow dark.
I'm here, I said. You must rest.
I'm dying. You've been good to me. I'll give you the papers. You will get there if you can live through the desert, which has killed me now, and my servant before me.
And he pulled out a leather pouch, and he handed it to me. Inside were some papers.
My ancestor came here 300 years ago, he said. He was the first Portuguese to land in Africa. His name was also Jose Silvestre, like me. He died in those mountains. His servant found him and brought back these papers. These papers have been in my family ever since. Maybe you will succeed where I failed, my friend.
His mind wandered. Another hour he was dead. What was in the papers? Sir Henry asked me. Well, I've shown them to no one except my dear wife, who's dead now, I told him. She thought it was all nonsense. I made a copy and had the Portuguese translated in English. Part of it was a map. I'll show it to you. I unfolded the paper and it read out.
I, Jose Silvestre, am now dying of hunger in a cave near the top of the southern peak of the mountains called the Viet Twins. In the year 1590. I am using my own blood for ink to write this. If my servant finds it, I have told him to see that it gets to the king. He can send an army to cross the desert to defeat the brave Kukuana tribe. Then he will be able to reach the mines of King Solomon. I have given the diamonds there in that treasure chamber beyond. This place of death, I have seen them. Because of Gagul, the witch finder, I barely escaped alive. Let he who comes follow the great road that Solomon made. Let him kill Gagul. And farewell.
When they finished looking at the papers, both Sir Henry and Captain Good turned to me in astonishment. I had been around the world twice, Captain Good said, but I've never heard a story like that in my life. You're not making it up, are you, Mr. Quatermain? Henry asked. You think I'm one of those silly fellows that thinks it's witty to tell lies? If you don't believe it, forget it. I stood up to leave. No, sit down, Sir Henry said. I see you aren't trying to fool us, only... Well, your story is so very strange, isn't it? Well, I haven't told you about my brother, about your brother, I said. The morning that Mr. Neville was starting out on his journey, I told them I saw his guide Jim preparing the wagon. Where are you off to, Jim? I asked. Hunting elephants? Oh, no. Well, after something far more valuable than ivory today, we're looking for diamonds. We're going to the Suleiman's Mountains. Well, you don't believe that foolish story of the Solomon's mines, do you? Mr. Neville says he must make a fortune somehow, and he's determined. So they started off across the desert together. That was the last I ever heard of them. Very afraid, I said to Sir Henry. Very afraid that your brother's dead. Well, I'm aware of that, he said. But I mean to chase him to those mountains and beyond. I won't give up until I find him, until I know for sure he's dead. Will you come with me? No, thank you, Sir Henry. I'm too old for a wild goose chase of that sort. My son depends on me. I cannot afford to risk my life too often, and wild adventure with you." Both Sir Henry and Captain Good looked very disappointed.
"Mr. Quatermain, I am very well off. I will pay you as much as you want. Before we leave, I'll arrange for your son to be taken care of in case anything happens to us. You are our only hope of reaching those mountains and finding my brother. If we come across any diamonds, they will belong to you and Good."
"That's a most generous offer. As this is the most difficult expedition I've ever considered, I think I'd like some time to think it over. I'll give you my answer before the ship reaches Durban." Then I said goodnight, and I went to bed. That night I dreamed of poor dead Silvestri and of diamonds. Before this shipboard encounter, I pretty nearly put poor old Silvestri and his strange story out of my mind. Now the tale was haunting me, not only in dreams, but in my waking hours as well. I had to give it much thought. I had to give Sir Henry my answer. Soon. It took us 5 days to sail up to Durban. All the time I was thinking over Sir Henry's offer. We did not speak about his brother again. I told them many tales of the hunting trips I'd been on, and they were all true ones, too. No hunter in that land has to make up exciting stories. Oh, no, they're all true. Finally, we came up near Durban. It was January, which in South Africa is our hottest month here. The coast was beautiful, with red sand hills and wide areas of green fields. Sir Henry, Captain Good, and I sat down for our last meal together on the ship. We came back on deck. The moon was up, shining silver off the calm sea to give everything a feeling of peace. "Well, Mr. Quatermain, have you thought about my offer?" "I hope we can count on you," Captain Good chimed in. In fact, I had been turning over his offer in my mind all that time, but I still hadn't quite made up my mind. Now in an instant I decided, "Yes, gentlemen, I will go with you. I have 3 conditions, though. First, Sir Henry, you will pay all expenses. Captain Good and I will share in any ivory or other valuables we find. Second, you will pay me 500 British pounds for my services. I will go with you until you turn back, or until we succeed, or until we meet disaster, I suppose. And third, in the event that I am killed, you arrange to pay my son Harry 200 pounds a year for 5 years." "I accept your terms gladly," Sir Henry said. "We'll pay even more, considering what you know of the country." "I like you both, and I think we'll make a good team," I said. "That's extremely important on a long journey such as this." "With you along, I'm sure we will succeed," Sir Henry asked. "I don't agree," I had to tell him. Actually, I think it's probable that none of us are going to return alive. The fate of Jose Silvestri and the fate of your brother will be our fate, most likely, and that fate will be death for all of us." "Then why do you agree to come along?" he asked. "Mainly I'm thinking of my son. I never made a lot of money, and most hunters don't live long. If I die on a hunting trip, I leave with nothing. If I die on this journey with you, I know he'll be taken care of."
"Well, none of us knows what lies ahead, can we? I can tell you, I'm going through to the end, sweet or bitter."
"Well, there'll be no turning back, that's a fact," I agreed. Next day we went ashore at Durban. Sir Henry and Captain Good set up a tent into my little house, and we began to prepare for the expedition. First, we arranged for Sir Henry to have money sent to my boy Harry, in case anything happened to us. He also paid me 500 pounds in advance. Next, we bought a strong wagon and 20 oxen. 16 of them would pull the wagon, and we would have 4 extra. These oxen are strong. They're small, they're strong and tough. They can live in the wild where bigger oxen can't. We also packed a box of medicines. We were fortunate that Captain Good had medical training and was as good a doctor at treating illnesses. He had a medicine chest and some doctor's instruments. His knowledge would prove very useful to us when we were long away from civilization. We took along many other things we'd need on a long expedition like this. Pots and pans, a compass, hunting knives, my bullwhip. Tried to take Caledonia's, but I think she left hers at home. But most important were the guns. We took 3 elephant guns, each weighing 15 pounds. We also obtained 3 high-velocity rifles. Oh, no, she does have her whip. Yep, Cala does have her whip. Fortunately, I have these 3 high-velocity rifles, and those were good for shooting medium-sized game, like antelope. We took 1 double-barrel shotgun for shooting birds and small game, 3 light Winchester repeating rifles as spare guns, and Well, 3 Colt revolvers. Every hunter knows how important guns and ammunition are in an expedition. We took 5 men with us. They all had to be brave and reliable. Goza and Tom were the Zulus we hired to handle the wagon. We also hired a Hottentot named Windvogel, who I knew was an excellent tracker, and another Zulu named Ethivia, who spoke perfect English. Oh, better than me, I think. We still needed 1 more man. We wondered where we would find someone when a man came to talk to me. He was tall, and he was handsome. He was a Zulu. He wore a loincloth and a necklace of lion's claws around his head, and he had a black ring that is worn by Zulus of high dignity. "What is your name?" I asked. "Umbopa," he said. "Well, what do you want, Umbopa?" "I hear that you are going far, far to north, beyond Malacca country. You are taking the white chiefs from over the water. Is this true?" "Why do you ask where we go?" "I would like to travel with you." "Tell me about yourself." "I am of the Zulu people, but not one of them. My own tribe lives far to the north. I have no home. I have wandered for many years. I came down from the north when I was a child. I left Zulu land. I came here because I wanted to see the white man's ways. Now I am tired, and I want to go home. Here is not my place. I want no money to travel with you. I am a brave man and will earn the meat I will eat." He did look different to most Zulus. His offer to come without pay made me suspicious. He'd been speaking to me in Zulu, the Zulu language. I translated his words into English for my companions and asked them what they thought. "Well, he's as big as Sir Henry," Captain Good said. "Very strong-looking." Sir Henry gazed at the man's proud and handsome face. The 2 of them were almost the same size, about 6 feet tall and very strong. "I like your looks, Mr. Umbopa," he said. "I'll take you along." Umbopa must have understood some English. He said, "It is well." But we soon left on our trip of, well, more than 1,000 miles. Tuscaloosa. Ay, ay, ay. Anyway, our goal was to reach Satanda village, 1,000 miles north of Durban. It was a journey that would take us almost 5 months. From there we began to cross the desert toward the Suleiman Mountains. For part of the way, we drove our wagon. Often I needed to crack my bullwhip over the heads of the oxen to get them to pull the wagon out of a gully or over a rock. We reached Invate, the trading town of Matabele country. At that point, we had to leave our wagon and oxen behind, along with the 2 drivers. Farther on, we'd meet the dreadful tsetse fly, whose bite kills any animal except for a man or a donkey. We were encouraged because some of the villagers in Yati remembered an Englishman named Neville, who had sold his wagons there 2 years ago. He'd gone up into the mountain country and had never been seen again. We knew we were right on the right track. We continued on our way with Umbopa, then Vogel, Kiva, plus a few men we hired to help carry our baggage. We were all quiet as we continued on foot. We wondered if we would ever see that wagon again. I didn't expect that we would. Umbopa, who was marching in front, broke into a Zulu chant about brave men journeying into the wilderness. In his song, the land they find is a paradise filled with game. We all laughed at Umbopa's cheerful nature. We had grown to like Umbopa very much. We'd been traveling for many long weeks now, and, well, we looked it. My own gray hair had grown out, and Sir Henry's blonde locks had gotten quite long. The only one who remained clean and tidy was Captain Good. He wore a brown tweed shooting suit with a hat to match. He kept his face clean-shaven and his monocle and false teeth in good order. He even wore a clean collar on his shirt. He was the neatest man ever to go into the wilderness. "I always like to look like a gentleman," he told us. One night we were sitting around the fire telling stories. Most of our helpers had gone to sleep. Only Umbopa was still up. He was sitting away from the others and must have been thinking about something. Suddenly we heard a huge roar from the bush. "That's a lion," I told the others. They said, "No, it's the truth." I said, "No, it's a lion." Immediately afterward came the loud trumpeting of an elephant. We peered out of our camp, and we saw the shadowy forms of wild animals moving toward the waterhole. The sun was just coming up when we again heard that awful roar. It sounded as if the lion were just outside of our camp. I took my rifle, my bullwhip, and I ran out. The others followed. We turned a corner, and there he was, a wild-maned lion who looked at us with bared teeth and gave a low growl. We all stopped dead in our tracks. Captain Good wanted to shoot the beast, but I stopped him. It's not necessary to kill him, I said. If I don't fire, he may kill us, he said. Stay calm and don't move. I took a step toward the lion, never taking my eyes off him. He was now crouching, ready to leap forward. I could see each of his long, sharp teeth. Back! I shouted. I flicked out my whip and I snapped it. The lion swatted out with a huge paw. I thought I might have to use my rifle after all, but a few more cracks of the whip made the lion retreat. He slunk off into the bushes. What I really could have used was one of those wooden chairs that you hold up hard for you, when you're chasing a lion. He could have killed you, Sir Henry said. I knew he had his eyes on something juicier than me, and I pointed over to where a herd of black sable antelope were watering at the pool. And we started on our way. Late in the afternoon, we came across a herd of elephants. We didn't need any meat. But Captain Good wanted a closer look at these heavy antelope called elands, which he'd never seen before. He gave Umbopa his rifle. He moved closer, followed by Kiva. Sir Henry and I sat down to rest and enjoy the beautiful scenery. Suddenly we heard an elephant scream. Against the red setting sun, we saw the black outline of a charging elephant, its mighty trunk raised high. An instant later, we saw Good and Kiva racing full speed back towards us. This was a huge bull elephant. We lifted our rifles, but we didn't dare shoot. The elephant was too far away, and we were afraid of hitting one of the men. Captain Good slipped and fell on his face right in front of the elephant. We gave a gasp, for we knew he must die. We ran as hard as we could toward him. It was all over in a few seconds. But it did not end as we thought. Thiva, seeing that Good was helpless, he turned back and threw his spear at the charging elephant. He struck the beast in his trunk. With a scream of pain, the elephant turned on the brave Thiva. He lifted the poor man with his trunk. He hurled him to the ground and trampled him to death. Sir Henry and I raised our rifles and fired at the enormous beast again and again. Good wrung his hands in grief over the courageous man who had saved his life. Umbopa looked down at his fallen comrade. He's dead. He's dead, but he died like a man. We journeyed on for many more hard weeks before we reached Sitanda's village, the real starting point of our expedition. I would think I'm with you, Lucci. That's more like dying like a bug on the bottom of somebody's foot. Now, this was a small settlement, Sitanda's village. By a river with some fields where the people kept cattle and grew crops. It was the end of the fertile land. Everything beyond here was dry sand. That evening, Sir Henry and I walked to the top of a slope to look at what lay out before us. In the distance, we could make out the blue outline of the Suleiman Mountains and their white caps of snow far away. There is where Solomon's mines are located, I said. Who knows if we'll ever make it there? Well, my brother should be there. If he is, I'll reach him somehow. Well, I hope so. As we turned back toward the village, we found that Umbopa had followed us. He also gazed across the wilderness. Is that where you plan to go? He asked in Zulu. I translated his words for Sir Henry. Yes, Umbopa, I will travel there. Why do you want to cross the desert where there is no water? Umbopa asked. Tell him, Sir Henry, that I go because I believe my brother is there. Tell him I go to find him. Umbopa said, a person of this village says that a white man went out into the desert 2 years ago with a guide named Jim. They never came back. There's no doubt it's your brother, I told Sir Henry. I know Jim well. And if George meant to cross the desert, if he meant to cross the desert, he would have done it, said Henry. We are very much alike, Umbopa said to Sir Henry. Perhaps I also go to seek a brother over the mountain. What do you know of those mountains? I asked him. There's a strange land there, Umbopa said. A land of witchcraft. Oh, I talk of such things. If we ever get across the mountains, I will tell you more then. He turned back toward the village. He knows more than he's saying, I said. The next day we prepared to start. We couldn't carry our heavy elephant rifles across the desert. We left them and my whip and much of the rest of our gear. He left his whip? Oh, no, that's terrible, isn't it? We left them and my whip and much of the rest of our gear with the man in the village. Every ounce of weight would slow us down as we crossed the burning sands. We each took a metal water bottle and a blanket. We carried dried meat to eat. We hired 3 villagers to go with us for our first day's journey, each carrying a large gourd with a gallon of water. We would then be able to refill our water bottles before we continued. We waited until after the sun went down. We planned to travel by night, and when it would be cooler, of course, we started out just as the moon rose. Just as the moon rose, flooding the country with a silver light, and before we left, we stood together looking at the vast desert. "Gentlemen," Sir Henry said, "we are starting on about as strange a journey as any man can make in this world. It is doubtful we will succeed, but we will stand together until the last, no matter what happens." We all said a silent prayer together, and now Sir Henry, "Let's go." So we started. We had nothing to guide us but the distant mountains, the map that old Jose Silvestro had drawn so long ago. We knew that we had to find a pool of bad water marked on the map or we would die of thirst, and that pool may have dried up many years ago. We had no way of knowing. As a sailor, Captain Good knew well how to read a compass. He went first, and we moved along in a single file behind him. We walked along through the moonlit night. When the sun came up, we spotted a pile of rocks in the distance, and we dragged ourselves up to it. We climbed beneath a ledge of rock and settled down to escape the heat of the day. We drank some water, we ate some of our dried meat, what little left we had of the cheese. We slept until 3 in the afternoon. We drank deeply from our water bottles, refilled them from the gourds. The villagers then headed back while we went on through the lonely wilderness. It was too dry here for any animals. The only living creatures around were the flies. We walked all night. But this time, when the sun came up, we could find no rocks to protect us. By 7 o'clock in the morning, we were already frying. "I can't stand this heat for much longer," said Sir Henry. "We'll have to dig a hole," Good said. "We can climb in and cover ourselves with bushes." So we dug out the sand with our hands until we had made a low hole. We all climbed inside and piled brush over our heads. This shielded us from some of the sun's rays with the heat. Ah, God, the heat was horrible. I do not know how we lived through that day. Our water was fast running out. At 3 in the afternoon, we decided it would be better to die walking than to lie there and roast. We each took a little drink and continued. "We've come 50 miles, said Sir Henry. "We must be near the water marked on the map." We saw no sign of that water. We crept along under the hot sun. When the darkness came, we rested, waiting for the moon to rise. We even slept a little then. Then we moved. Tortured by thirst and prickly heat, we no longer walked, but we staggered. We barely had energy left to speak. About 2 in the morning, we arrived at a low hill about 100 feet high. Here we stopped to rest, drinking down the last of our water. I was just dropping off to sleep when I heard Umbopa say to himself in Zulu, "If we cannot find water, we shall be dead before the moon rises tomorrow." I knew he was right. We must find water, or we would suffer an awful death, and soon. The end. Okay, it's not really the end, but next chapter. Here we go. I woke up at 4 in the morning, tortured by thirst. I could sleep no more. I'd been dreaming that I was sitting in a cool stream with green banks. I woke to find myself in that dry wilderness. My eyelids were stuck together, and I had to rub them open. Soon the others awoke and we began to discuss our situation. Not a drop of water was left. Our bottles was dry as bones. "If we do not find water, we shall die," Sir Henry said. "Jose Silvestri's water is shown here on his map. But where is it?" Well, no one had much of a hope of finding the pool marked on that old map. It began to get light. Then Vogel rose, and he walked around the base of the hill with his eyes on the ground. Soon he stopped and he pointed to the ground. "What is it? What is it?" We all ran over to see where he was standing. "Fresh tracks of antelope. They never go too far from the water." This discovery gave us some hope and renewed our energy. Sorry, I made the mistake of looking at local chat and laughed. Then Vogel put his nose in the air and sniffed. "Hey, I smell water." We were happy then, knowing that there must be water nearby. At that moment the sun came up, just as Lucci said it would. Tomorrow, the sun came up. Tomorrow, which was now today. A sight so beautiful that for the moment we forgot how thirsty we were. And there, less than 40 miles away, were the White Twins, the beginning of the Suleiman Mountains. Each peak of the Twins was 50,000 feet high. They were connected by a long cliff, as if they were pulling the pillars of a gigantic gateway. There was something solemn, overpowering about those huge mountains, which were certainly extinct volcanoes. The morning light gleamed from their snow-covered tops, while the white mists gathered around their lower parts. But soon our thirst became overpowering. Did no good for Ventvogel to smell water if we could not find it. We walked all the way around the hill. We found no sign of a spring or a stream or even a pool. "You're a fool," I said to Ventvogel. "There's no water. I smell it. It's close. It's in the clouds. Maybe in 2 months it'll rain and wash our dead bones down." "Maybe it's on top of the hill," Sir Henry suggested. "Impossible," Captain Good said. "Who ever heard of water being found on top of a hill?" "We might as well go up and look." Umbopa led us up the sandy slope. "Here it is!" he cried. When we reached the top, we ran to him. There in the hollow at the very top of the mound was a pool of water. We didn't care that it was black and nasty looking. In a second we were all lying on our stomachs and sucking up the water as it was the nectar of the gods. We drank and drank, and we tore off our clothes. We sat in the pool soaking up the moisture. We rose, refreshed, and ate some of our dried meat. Then we settled down in the shade and slept until noon. We rested near the water all day. We thanked the ghost of Jose Silvestre, who had drawn that map. We figured the water must come from some deep spring. We drank as much as we could. We filled our water bottles before we started out on our way. At night we covered 25 miles and slept in the shade of some ant heaps. Mountains seemed to tower above us now. The next day we reached the lower slope of one of the White Twins. Our water was gone again. There were no streams coming down the mountains, so we would have to wait until we reached the snow to ease our thirst. We began our long climb up the lava rock, which has made our feet very sore. We were soon exhausted. We stopped to rest. Off to the side, along a flat ridge, we saw an area of green growth. Soil had formed among the stone, and birds had dropped seeds. But what good did it do us? We couldn't eat grass. Still, Umbopa wandered over to have a look at this green patch. A few minutes later, he returned, dancing and shouting like a maniac. "We hoped he'd found water. What is it, Umbopa?" Food and water!" He waved something green in his hand. It was a melon. He'd found a patch of wild melons. We ran to the melon patch and began to eat. They weren't very tasty, but we were glad for the food and the moisture they contained. We were still hungry, but our luck held. At that moment, a flock of large birds was flying over. I grabbed one of the Winchesters and I fired 2 shots in the midst of them. I was lucky to hit one. It weighed about 20 pounds. We built a fire of melon stalks and roasted him over it. We felt much better when we had finished our meal. At night, we again moved on, carrying as many melons as we could. The air became cooler and cooler as we moved higher. The mountainside grew steeper. We could only move at about a mile an hour. Except for pudding. Oh. That night, we ate the last scrap of our dried meat. We knew we would have water as soon as we reached the snow line, but now we began to worry about food. Except for the birds, we'd seen no living thing on the mountains. Now the nights were very cold. We struggled up the mountains without food. We began to feel faint and weak. We sucked on snow to satisfy our thirst, but nothing at all to eat. At night we wrapped ourselves in our blankets. The cold turned bitter. And now we were walking through deep snow. Night was coming on. The cold wind made us all shiver. "According to the map, we must be near that cave," Captain Good said. "Yeah, if there is a cave. We'll find it soon. If we don't, we're all dead men." Continued on in silence. Then Umbopa, who was in the lead, said, Look! He pointed to a hole in the snow just ahead. We hurried on. It was a cave, just as Jose Silvestre had described it. We crawled inside this small cave just as the sun went down. We huddled together and wrapped in our blankets and tried to sleep, but the cold, that bitter cold, kept us awake. We were worn out from lack of food and from the heat of the desert. Now the cold seemed about to kill us. Hour after hour we sat there shivering. Not long before dawn I heard Ventvogel's teeth chattering away like mad, and he gave a deep sigh and fell silent. I thought he had fallen asleep. Finally the sun came up and peeped into our cave. We began to stir, all of us. All of us but Van Vogel. I shook him, but he wouldn't wake up. He was stone dead and frozen stiff. Suddenly I heard a shout of fear from Captain Good. We all turned. The sun was coming straight into the cave now, and there, at the end, about 20 feet away from us, was another dead man. The sight of that corpse was too much for us. We all scrambled up out of that cave as fast as our legs would carry us. Then we halted, feeling rather foolish to be afraid of a dead man. "Well, I'm going back," Sir Henry said. That was the corpse of a man. It could be my brother." We all walked back inside. Sir Henry moved toward the dead man and peered into his face. "Oh, thank God it's not my brother." I looked the corpse over myself. It had gray hair and a mustache. It was naked. Around the neck hung an ivory crucifix. "Oh, I know who it is," Captain Good said, looking over my shoulder. "Oh, it's old Jose Silvestri, of course." "Impossible. He died 300 years ago." "Yeah, the cold air preserved his body. There are no wild animals here. No one to eat him. No doubt his servant found him dead, took his clothes for warmth. Look, there's the sharp bone they used to draw the map. And there's a wound on his arm. That's where he drew the blood to use as ink." Sad to imagine the lonely death of the ancient explorer, laying here naked for 300 years. "We'll leave him a companion," Sir Henry said. We moved the body of Vogel to the back of the cave, and we placed it near that of the old Portuguese gentleman. We went out into the snow then, glad of the sunshine, but still faint with hunger and cold. Again, I moved down the mountain. We couldn't see anything up ahead because of the heavy fog that covered the slope. Finally, we broke out of the mist, and we saw, at the end of a long stretch of snow, a patch of green. A stream was running through the green grass. As the mist cleared, we looked down on the entire scene. I've never seen anything like what lay before us. 500 feet below where we were lay expanses of fertile land. To our left was grassland. We could make out many herds of game or cattle wandering there. This territory was ringed by a wall of distant mountains. To our right was an area of rolling hills. There we could see groups of dome-shaped huts. "Doesn't that map mention Solomon's Great Road?" Sir Henry asked. I nodded. "There it is! There it is!" he said, pointing a little to our right. Captain Good and I looked. There, winding across the plain, was a wide road. How strange to find what looked like a proper Roman road right in the middle of all this wilderness. The gigantic Tyrannosaurus Rex walking right down the middle of it, followed by a... Oops, sorry, I got off on the wrong page there. Okay. We climbed down the mountain to the right, and soon we stood with the road at our feet. It had been cut out of a solid rock and was at least 50 feet wide. Someone had kept it up very well. The odd thing was that it seemed to begin right there, right in the middle of nowhere. "What do you make of it, Quartermain?" I shook my head. It was a mystery to me. "I know," Good said. "This road once ran right over the mountain and across the desert, but a volcanic eruption has covered it with lava. On the other side, the sand drifted over it. It was very much more pleasant traveling downhill on this magnificent road with our stomachs full than it was struggling uphill over snow, starved and half frozen, I can tell you that." We grew cheerful. This was quite a road. When it came to a deep ravine, it passed over smoothly on a bridge of cut stones. At another spot, it zigzagged down a cliff. At a third point, it passed through a high ridge by way of a tunnel. Inside the walls of this tunnel, we could see carvings of figures driving chariots. "These appear to be the work of Egyptians," Sir Henry said. "Perhaps they were here even before Solomon's time." All morning we walked down the mountain. By noon we had come to an area where lovely silver trees grew along the road. "There's a lot of woods here," said Good. "We could stop and cook some dinner." We all agreed to this eagerly. We left the road, we found a small stream, we collected some dry wood, and we soon had a nice fire burning, quite like this one out here in front of us now. Well, they had beer and sausage, though, but We cut off pieces of the antelope meat. Well, I guess they did have. We had brought them, we roasted them over the fire on the ends of sharp sticks. We ate hungrily, and we sat down to rest. The stream flowed gently beside us. After all we'd been through, this was like a paradise. Captain Good took a bath in the stream. Now he was in his underwear, brushing out his clothes. He polished his boots with a piece of fat from the antelope. Next he produced a small mirror from his bag, and he looked himself over. He combed his hair very carefully. Then he felt the 10 days beard on his chin. Surely, I thought, he's not going to try and shave himself here. But he was. He washed his face, he scrubbed it with the fat, and then he produced a small razor and began to scrape at his whiskers. It was a painful process, I could tell, but he soon cleaned off the right side of his face, and I saw a flash of light sail past his head. He and I both started in surprise. A group of men stood 20 paces beyond Good. They're very tall, wore great plumes of black feathers and cloaks of leopard skin. A younger man of 17 was in front of them. He had just thrown a shiny knife that barely missed Good. An older man who looked like a soldier caught the boy by the arm and said something to him. And they came closer. Sir Henry, Captain Good, and Umbopa had by this time grabbed their rifles and stood ready to shoot. The strange men came on, showing no concern. I realized that they didn't know what rifles were, or they would have been more careful. "Put down your guns," I shouted. I knew that our only hope was to make peace with them. I spoke to the older man. "Greetings," I said in the Zulu language, not knowing what language to use. "Greetings," he replied in an old-fashioned form of Zulu. "Where do you come from? Why are three of you white, and the fourth like us?" He pointed at Umbopa. It was true that Umbopa's size and looks were similar to those men before us. "We are strangers from across the mountains," I said. "We come in peace." "You lie." "See, I told you, Herndon. There was lying going on." "You lie. No one can cross the mountains where all things die. No stranger may live in the land of Kukuana. It is the king's law. Prepare to die, stranger." The hands of each of the men went toward large and heavy knives that they wore at their sides. "What does he say?" Captain Good asked. "He says we're about to be killed," I replied. I looked around. There was no way out. Good groaned with fear. As he often did when he was nervous, he pulled his false teeth out and he let them snap back into his mouth. Seeing this, all the Kukuanas gave a cry of horror. They jumped back. "It's his teeth," whispered Sir Henry. "Take them out, Good. Take out your teeth." He did so, slipping them into the sleeve of his shirt. The old man was drawn toward Good by curiosity. "How is it that the man whose legs are bare, who grows hair on one side of his face, who has one shining eye, can make his teeth move out of his head and back?" "Open your mouth," I said to Good. He grinned at them, showing that his empty gums. The men gasped. Good turned his head and slipped his teeth back in. He grinned again. The young man who had thrown the knife gave a howl of terror. "See, you are spirits. Pardon us, oh my lords." "We grant you pardon," I said, going along with their mistake. "It's true we are spirits. We come from another world. We come from the biggest star that shines at night." They groaned in astonishment now. "Hi, Luci. We come to visit and to bless you, but you're welcome. You welcome us by throwing a knife at the head of him whose teeth come and go. How could we judge the man who would do such a terrible thing?" "Spare him, my lord," the old man said. "He is the king's son." "Maybe you doubt our power," I said to him. "I will show you the magic tube that speaks, and you will doubt no longer." I held up my rifle. On a rock about 70 yards away, I spotted a small antelope. I pointed. "I will kill that buck without moving." "It is not possible," they answered. I aimed the rifle. I knew I had better not miss. Bang! That buck fell dead. The Kukuana men cried out with terror. "If you want meat, go and fetch the buck," I said. "I do not speak empty words." "You are wizards indeed. We will bring you to the king. I am Infadus, son of Kafa, once the king of the Kukuana people. This youth is Skraga, son of Twala. Twala, the great king." "We are ready to meet your king. But play no tricks on us, or the magic tubes will talk with you loudly. Beware." At once they took up all of our goods except the guns, which they didn't dare to touch. They even grabbed Good's neatly folded clothes. "Give me those," he said. "I want to put them on." Umbopa translated. "But the Lord cover his white legs from the eyes of his servant?" Infidus asked. "Have we offended the Lord?" I almost exploded with laughter. Look here, Good," Sir Henry said. "You can't put your trousers on. They want you the way you are in your underwear." "Yeah," I said, "with the whiskers on one side of your face. If you change, they might think we're fakes. They might decide to kill us after all." Sid sighed and marched off in his underwear, half-shaven. All afternoon we traveled along the roadway. I asked in Farus who made the road. It was made in old time. No one knows who when, not even the wise man Gagu. How long have your people been here? I asked him. 10,000. 10,000 moons. We settled here, became powerful. When King Twala calls his soldiers, their plumes cover the plain as far as an eye can see. Who do his armies fight with? Warriors come from the north. We slay them. Some years ago we also fought a civil war. Our people battling among themselves. Well, how did that happen? He told me that King Twala, his older brother, was one of a pair of twins. Twala, the younger and weaker baby, was hidden away. Imotu became king when his father Kafa died. But a famine came on the land and everyone was hungry. The people spoke against Imotu. Then Gagul, the terrible woman, the hunter of witches, said that Imotu was no king. Twala is to be king. She led Twala out and showed the people that around his waist was tattooed a snake, the symbol of the son of a king. It was a snake. That's your cue, Kelly. Snakes. Why does it have to be snakes? Okay, never mind. The people were mad with hunger. They shouted for Twala to be king. Imotu came out of his hut to see what was happening. He was followed by his wife and his little son Ignosi. At that moment, Twala, his own brother, ran to him and stabbed him through the heart. The people all shouted, "Twala is our king! Twala is our king!" Did Twala kill Imotu's wife and son too? They ran away, he told me, but no one would give them food. They went off toward the mountains where they must have died. If Ignosi had lived, he would be the true king of the Kukuwana people. There ahead is the town where Ignosi and his mother were last seen, Inferdu said. There we shall sleep tonight, if indeed you people of the stars sleep. When we are among the Kukuwana, we do as the Kukuwana do. I turned around to speak with the others and almost ran into Mbopa. He'd been following close behind, listening in with great interest to what the photos had been saying. The expression on his face was strange, as if he were trying to remember something from long ago. When we reached the village, we saw many soldiers marching out toward us, and Sir Henry was alarmed. It looks like we're in for a warm reception. Let not my lords be afraid, Inferdu said. These soldiers are under my command. They are coming to greet you. We went on, but we were feeling quite nervous now. Half a mile from the gates of the village was a stretch of land sloping upward from the road. Each company of 300 men stood in formation, their spears and plumes shining in the sun. By the time we arrived, 12 companies awaited us, 3,600 men. They were powerful warriors, each more than 6 feet in height. On their heads, they wore black plumes like those of our guide. They wore belts of white oxtails around their waists. Each carried a shield of about 20 inches across, metal covered with gray ox hide. For weapons, they had short, heavy spears that were not made for throwing, but for stabbing. Each man also carried 3 heavy knives that weighed 2 pounds apiece. One knife hung at his waist, the other 2 were fixed to the back of his shield. He could hit a target with these from 50 yards away. As we passed by, each group of men would raise their spears in the air and roar, "Kum! Kum!" This was their royal salute. Then they fell into march behind us. These are the Greys, Inferdu told us. We call them Grey because of their grey shields. They are the best of the king's warriors. The women of the town now stood and watched us arrive. They stared at Good's beautiful white legs, which made him very embarrassed. And Farus led us to a comfortable hut and told us to rest. There were couches of tanned skins to lie on in order to wash with. Soon the villagers came in with hot food, meat, roast corn, and honey. And Farus and Scrogga came to dine with us. The old man was polite, but I could see that the king's son was growing suspicious. If we ate, if we drank, if we slept like men, he may have thought, maybe we were not from another world after all. Let's ask him about my brother, Sir Henry said. Not yet, I warned. We won't say anything about that until we see what happens. King Twala, Inferdu told us, was in the main town, Lu, getting ready for the annual feast. All the warriors would attend and parade before the king. We will start for there tomorrow, he said. And we'll pick up our tale right there next week. So that's part one of King Solomon's Mines. We got two more.